Thank you, Acting Presiding Officer. And I'd like to begin by thanking and paying tribute to those who work in the housing support sector. It is important that we remember that they work in a challenging environment where they deal day to day with vulnerable people who can have complex needs. And this can have quite an emotional impact on them as they try their best to help them. Moreover, so many are earning minimum wage and are working in very stressful environments, in hostels, for instance, where there can be a considerable threat of violence towards them. I, for one, am enormously grateful for the work that they do, and we should all recognise this. Acting Presiding Officer, I actually think this report does a decent job of highlighting the issues that are faced by agencies and their staff who are helping vulnerable people find homes. It is clear that the short-termism and inconsistency of the funding model is not beneficial, and we have to be mindful that whilst government funding is always stretched, this problem of homelessness is never going to go away. There will always be people who find themselves in a vulnerable position in life, who are dealing with trauma that has left them struggling, and who simply do not have the support networks of family and friends to help them out. Therefore, I feel strongly that we need to do more to design a sustainable, long-term funding model. I imagine it must be enormously frustrating for these agencies that just want to get on and help people to have to spend so much time in applying for grants, worrying about the next funding cycle, or worrying if they will qualify for an uplift of funding. What they need is consistent funding that is guaranteed and frankly permits them to get on with the job of helping people. I believe that this will help to improve consistent good practice by helping retain staff and save money by reducing the need to keep retraining people. The report highlights the high turnover of staff because of the stressful environment that they are working in. If you have a consistent funding model, it enables organisations to financially reward staff for their hard work and loyalty, and that can go a long way in helping staff feel secure. There is no doubt in my mind that many people work in this sector because they find the work that they do helping so fulfilling, and it is right that they should have stable jobs and a pay that pays them a decent and fair wage. Acting Presiding Officer, I want to pick up on point 71 of the report, where Llaumai highlighted that the funding model for supported accommodation relies on a percentage of staffing costs being recovered from rents and service charges rather than the HSG, which means that rents become really expensive, in their words, and makes it difficult for young people to move into employment while living there, as they would then become liable for paying the rent through their wages rather than the housing benefit. I think this is strong evidence that the current funding model is no longer fit for purpose and does need restructuring. The rental housing market has been severely impacted by Welsh Government reforms, causing market rental prices to increase substantially. And we have to face the reality that rental costs have substantially outpaced increases in funding. Recovering a percentage of staffing costs from rents and service charges is clearly working against what we are trying to achieve, which is to help people find affordable housing and secure jobs. I am conscious that there is no magic money tree that the Welsh Government can produce to just pay for everything. But I feel that there is so much wastage in having this disjointed funding model that if we streamline how funding is administered, then there is a potential to save money that can actually be redirected into where it is needed. In terms of housing availability, clearly this is a major challenge and is only exacerbated by the fact that the private rental accommodation market has not kept pace with housing needs. Government reforms have meant that the risk of investing by private individuals in the rental market is no longer worth the profit. And we have to accept that in long term, we have an ever-decreasing proportion of the market available for rent. The fact that an estimated 70% of housing association tenants require a level of housing support to maintain their tenancy just shows how big the situation has become. We also have to consider that private landlords are also not overly enthused about letting their properties to local authorities. We have seen countless instances where promised support to landlords has not materialised, damage not rectified, and councils taking a belligerent stance. Worse, tenants being housed in unsuitable accommodation and in unsuitable locations. What this ultimately says is that letting to the local authorities has a bad image, and is a high risk for private landlords. Therefore, for this to change, there needs to be a gear shift in the way local authorities deal with private landlords. Finally, as we have seen, temporary accommodation is not always welcomed by those looking for accommodation because they are seen as too dangerous. And I've even spoken with people who believe it or not, acting presiding officer, say that they are far safer sleeping on the streets than in temporary accommodation because of the violence and drug use that happen there. In closing, acting presiding officer, I would like to reiterate that this is a well-balanced report and has identified some of the major challenges we are facing. Clearly, there is a major issue with the funding model, and this needs to be urgently addressed. We also need to be mindful that the issue of vulnerability is never going to go away, and so it is important that we invest in a system that is able to cope with the challenges. We all want to see homelessness eradicated.
The member must now conclude, please.
Thank you. We all want to see homelessness eradicated, but I feel, unfortunately, that given where we are, this is a very long way off. Thank you.